back. I'm Sidra Kaluska, and this is An Artist's Life. Today I'm going to be talking about tomato cages. As you can see behind me, I have started building my tomato cage wall contraption. Normally I would try to do this from start to finish so you could see the whole process, but I really just needed to get in there and get things in place. Our weather has been a little questionable and I just wanted to get things taken care of. I'm going to show you how I'm going to lash everything together and also talk about the process of building cages. Most people, if you haven't done tomatoes before, you go to the store, you buy your tomato plants, you buy a cage, and you think you're done. Most of your tomato cages at your standard store are probably going to run from about 3 to 4 feet tall, which has always confused me as a person who starts their tomato plants from seed, because most of my tomato plants get 8 to 10 feet tall, so a 3 foot, 4 foot cage is not going to do anything. So when you're looking at tomato cages and looking at your tomato plants, you want to make sure that you have a cage that's going to work with the kind of tomato plant that you have. There are two basic kinds of tomato plants. You have your determinates and your indeterminates. Your determinates means it at a determined time it's going to fruit. It's all going to be in one particular window, and when that window's done, your plant is done as well. Your indeterminate will, once it starts to fruit, it just keeps fruiting until a frost basically comes and kills it. So with your determinate varieties, those are shorter, and so you could maybe get away with those standard 3 to 4 foot cages. So determinates usually run anywhere from 3 to 5 feet tall, usually more in the 5 to 4 foot range. It just depends on the variety, and there are also your dwarf and your micro plants, which tend to be smaller too. So if you are looking at a smaller space or don't have the means to really build some large tomato cages, you may want to consider some of your determinate varieties. Romas are a standard determinate variety. I prefer growing indeterminate varieties. I just like that longer fruit season, and it just happens to be some of the ones I'm more attracted to as far as growing and as far as fruit production goes. So since they are larger plants, I need to build larger contraptions. So I'm using a combination of bamboo stakes and tower baskets. The tower baskets I have built out of essentially reclaimed materials. For anyone who has access to tree nurseries, when larger trees are shipped, the root ball is basically in these wire baskets with some like burlap and then patted down. It helps contain everything. These baskets were used for that purpose. So I'm just taking something that is the byproduct of the nursery industry, and I'm lashing them together and stacking them from bottom to bottom, top to top, with a with a top ring on the bottom, because it has a nice wide surface area, and the wider the surface, the more distributed the weight is, which helps balance out the entire structure overall. I alternate my baskets with my bamboo stakes at this point. You could do all bamboo stakes, it's just I already had the basket, so it was something easy to repurpose. And basically once I've kind of established them, I don't need to go back and super rebuild them every year, where the bamboo I have to entirely rebuild the structure. So it does take time, it is a little bit of a pain in the butt, however, it is a very, very sturdy structure. where your standard tomato cages at the store have those flimsy little metal legs, and most people have probably seen at the end of the season somebody just trashing them because they're so bent up they're no longer functional. Where the bamboo, you can use it for several seasons before you have to replace it. And since you get to build your own contraption, you get to install those stakes as deep as you want, or as deep as you can get them in your substrate. I usually try to get them in at least 6 inches. If you can do a foot, that's awesome. Don't know what your situation is, but I need to be particularly watchful because we have lots of wind that comes from this direction and just blows straight through our garden, and if it's not properly secured, my plants are going to start tipping in that direction. I did basically the same style last year. I did it the length of my garden, and that thing did not shift. It was completely solid, so I'm very happy with that, and I'm just going to keep on with that style. So right now, if you can look at my structure, I have not lashed anything together yet. It's just sitting in place. My bamboo poles, for the most part, are essentially vertical. I usually try, if I can, to tilt them outwards slightly as I'm inserting them into the ground, because when I bring them together to lash them, the force of bringing them in together creates a little bit of tension, and that makes the structure more secure. I have a couple that, just trying to get it in the ground, the poles are a little crooked, they're not all straight. Some of them ended up being tipped on the inward part. I'm just gonna leave them as is. Everything's getting lashed together, so it's going to be pretty secure, but it doesn't create the same amount of tension at that point, so it's not quite as stable as actually bringing them in and forcing them into that position. So I'm going to lash those together. I'm going to lash some of my cross beams to those vertical posts, and I'm also going to lash those to the wire baskets. So basically when I'm done, this is going to be one solid wall with a foundation that has some wide areas and some that are directly inserted into the ground. So it'll be very stable. With the basket structures, the tomatoes already have essentially a built-in support. I just need to help them get through those junction points in the wire baskets. But from that point, the wire baskets itself will support the plants. The ones with the bamboo posts alone, though, I'm going to need to secure either some cloth bands or some sort of twine from post to post, so it kind of secures across the two posts, and then the plant will grow up in between, and then that cloth binding will help support the plant between the two posts as it grows up. So again, two different kind of planting styles that I've incorporated into one solid wall. When I get in there, I'll show you things a little bit better. Some things you're going to need to build your garden contraption. First of all, you need poles of some sort. You can get T-posts, which are a little expensive. You can get some sort of tall baskets. They do make really tall tomato cages. The tallest ones I've seen are around 6 feet, but they also run around $89 a piece, which is a little on the expensive side for a lot of us gardeners or those who are just getting started. That is definitely a big investment to make. I try to do low-key, low-maintenance, low-budget kind of stuff. So again, repurposing. For those of you who live in a climate that bamboo does grow, I can almost guarantee you can find somebody that is desperate to have bamboo cut out of their yard, because it is invasive. So once it gets established, it will quickly try to take over as much space as possible. So bamboo was absolutely free, which was pretty awesome. I was able to haul it in my little car. I just popped the hatchback open and just slid everything in. Some other things that you may want to consider, I am going to finish binding my unit together with twine. I'm going to be using cotton twine because it will eventually biodegrade in the garden after a couple uses, so I don't have to worry about adding more pollutants to the environment. Something that I also just bought this year and have been particularly happy with it so far, but again, I've only had it for one season. I'm not exactly sure how well it's going to hold up over time, but it was listed as something that can be reusable. This is a garden twist tie essentially. It has a PVC coating with a solid wire on the inside, so just cut off what you need, basically wrap it around a couple times like a twist tie and secure it. You want to do this firmly. You don't want it to be loose, because if it's loose, it's going to start wobbling around. And if you're talking about a structure that you need to be secure, you don't want that wobble to be in there. If you're just using this to say help support a plant growing up something, and you just want it to secure the plant to a sturdy structure, you do want it to be loose. Not so loose that it's going to be problematic for your plant, but you just want it to have a little bit of give, because the plant's going to grow, it's going to get thicker, your stems are going to get bigger. So if you have it too tight, it's actually going to cut off some circulation. But I am just going to be using this for binding purposes. I used it to attach my wire cages together, and I've also used it to help build this massive beam fence that I have over here. So I basically built hinges with it in 3 locations going up the grid. Okay, so with the wire, I recommend using wire cutters. You can use scissors, but the scissors will not be the same after you use them on this. If you use somebody's favorite scissors, they're not going to be too happy with you at the end of the day. Okay. And for your twine, you can just use standard scissors that you have lying around the house. Here's a close-up of basically what I have going on at this point. So we have wire cages over here. And you can see I have the bamboo just slat in between. One thing I do like about including both the bamboo and the cage here is that the bamboo can rest on the cage in several junctions and just kind of help stabilize things as I'm working on them. If I didn't have the cages here, it would be a little bit trickier getting my poles in as I was starting to build this structure, because there wouldn't be anything to hold it as I'm lashing it together. So those are really secure in place right now. I still need to lash them. You want to kind of be uniform in where you would be applying your horizontals, just to give it an even layout and even support across the way. Sometimes you'll notice that your bamboo beams do bow in a particular direction, so you might have to work with it here and there. And if you do decide to do strictly bamboo sticks, which is perfectly fine, something you'll need to keep in mind is you need to space your bamboo posts relatively the same distance all the way apart in a line, because if you kind of shift your bamboo posts even just a couple inches each time you put one in, it's going to be harder to lash your horizontals, because if you have something that's straight and then the surface that you're trying to work with to attach it to keeps shifting in different directions, that is going to make it more difficult to get your horizontals to lash in place. So that's what I have here. These cages are probably about close to 6 feet tall, the wire ones. And then my bamboo posts are probably around 7-8 feet. that are still sticking up from the surface. They were about 10 feet before I put them into the ground. So that just gave me around the amount of wiggle room I wanted as far as getting the posts in the ground before I was actually going to work with them on the vertical plane. I'm going to work now on getting everything lashed together, and then I'll have the footage rolling as normal so you can see my entire process. And then I'll go back in after everything has been properly attached and do some zoom ins so you can see how things are bound together and how secure it is when I'm finished. I wanted to give you a close-up view of how I'm lashing the bamboo posts together. I'm kind of doing a crisscross motion and then doing a slip knot, kind of like tying your shoe but just with one lace instead of a double bow. It's pretty easy to do, and I've come to this knotting style from several trial on error. I've been using bamboo for several years now, and I've tried various different knots, and this definitely seems to work the best for me. I'll do one from this angle, and then I'll do one more from the other side so you can see both sides of how this looks. I leave about 6 inches on one side, and you can see that I'm actually going to be forcing these two posts together. Doing a lot of knotting over the day may make your fingers feel a little sore by the end, just as an FYI. I have tried knotting with gloves on, and it just doesn't seem to work out super well. I don't have the dexterity that I need. Okay, getting 2 across, you can see that I can easily pull this together now, and it's staying in place. In the front, where you can't see, I'm placing my thumb on top of both loops, which kind of just holds the twine in place, so you see it's not moving and I'm not holding it. I'll lightly hold that one side, but just holding it very firmly for all of these knots is really going to make your hand hurt. So if you can reduce some of that, it's helpful. Okay, so you can see I was going in one direction. When I came back around, I switched to the bottom so I could do a cross this time. So it's getting secured from 2 different angles. Okay, now that I have 2 going across in each direction, I'm going to leave this off a little bit longer, maybe 8 to 10 inches, kind of depending how thick your bamboo posts are. If they are thicker, you're going to need some more leeway. If they're thinner, you'll need less. So taking this, crossing over, swinging around, so it's not actually tied, but I can pull it in the opposite direction and secure it pretty well. Criss on top, pull tight, loop underneath, pull tight, loop on top. And you can see I have 2 that are different lengths now. I will use the shorter one to tie the first knot, and then the longer side I'm going to loop around, basically like I'm tying a shoelace, but I'm only doing 1 bow instead of 2. I'm just gonna pull that. Now I'm going to wiggle this around a little bit, and you can see that tightens the knot, and I'll just pull that string a little bit more and secure that more. I want to leave a good amount on this one loop and a little bit of a shorter side on this other one. Depending on what time of year it is, birds might still be trying to nest and might find this very attractive. So if you tie this really securely and do a single loop, it should be able to come undone fairly easily for you, but not too easily for the birds. I'm doing it this way on purpose because by knotting it this way, I can untie this easily and just reuse this twine in another season. So if I can reuse something, I can. The shorter knots that I'm making on my baskets over here, those I'm just using shorter pieces, and I'm just doing a double knot, just securing it. I don't anticipate really reusing those, but the ones that I was doing on the bamboo posts are longer, so I can definitely reuse that. I've just switched sides here so you can see how I'm going to lash it from the front section. You can see I have about an inch gap here, so by tying it, it's going to force this together, reinforce the structure, and kind of create tension in a good way that'll help make the structure stronger. Scissors to the side. Again, I want to leave around 4 to 6 inches on the front. This first pass is going to be a little bit more difficult since I'm trying to create the tension, but it's hard to do that while balancing the string in one hand and trying to hold it in place with the other. So I'm just going to do basically my double loop here, and then from this section hold my string as long as I want it, and then just pull. That brings that together nicely, and I have created the amount of tension that I want. So I'm going to swing this around the bottom. Loop it across the front, and that also now holds those strings securely so you don't have to worry as much about holding them in place. And do the second loop. So that gives me 2 loops across the back on either side. Okay, want to leave about 8 to 10 inches on that one side. Take this, cross around the back, and go up, down, and I'm doing this very snugly. I don't want wiggle room. By doing this cross section around the first layer strings, this is really securing them in place, so if there was any wiggle room at first, you're now tightly securing that, and that also helps this from sliding. So if this whole structure tries to shift on you, these are really going to want to stick fast instead of trying to slide and move. So, single knot, and then take the longer string, loop that around like you're tying a shoelace, and kind of the short side from the other one, wiggle that back and forth as you're pulling. That'll really secure that knot. And I'm going to shorten that just a tiny bit on this lace side. Okay, so that gives me my nice secure knot. This is in place. I don't have to worry about anything else. So that's how I lash all of these joists together right here. I do a slightly different knot up top. So my knot on top is a little bit different. Again, I wanted to do it in such a way that it makes it easy for it to stay in place and hard for it to slip off. So I've crossed the poles, you can see here. And then when I crossed it, I took the string and I wove it from either side. So here I wove it from either side, back and forth. I did that several times. And then at that point, I took the string from the bottom and the top. I crisscrossed them and then wrapped them around the center. And then did the same kind of slip knots. By doing that, that really helps secure these in place. Again, I don't have to worry about that slipping back and forth. This is a very key juncture in the structure because these 2 posts coming together help secure this whole system. So if these start to slip and shift, that's really going to be detrimental to the entire integrity of our unit. So this is a very important juncture in this whole structure. That's how I put all of this together. So basically we have, for the most part, everything secure. There are just a couple more places that I need to round off as far as tying knots. The structure is pretty secure. It does have some wiggle still. I can live with the wiggle that we have though, but it's definitely way more secure than it was before. And now I have a super sturdy structure for all of my tomato plants to come grow up through. Hope this helped. If you have any questions, let me know. It would be great if you would like my page and subscribe. If you're interested in the other things that I do, you can also like my Facebook page and see all of the art that I create. Hope you have a great day and happy gardening. Bye.